Good morning, everyone. I think we'll kick off this session if everyone's able and willing. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders of present day and those gone before us. I also acknowledge the next generation of emerging leaders. I want to take a moment to recognise the countless efforts, hard work, resilience and dedication of our elders. We stand here today on the shoulder of giants who had no resources, no income, no staff, however showed up day in and day out with all odds stacked against them to path the way to where we are today. Our elders who survived through mass genocide and stolen generation, assimilationist policies, stolen wages, not even recognised as people but flora and fauna, not having freedom of movement, no basic human rights. Yet here we are, a product of their efforts and never give up attitude, which carved the path we now find ourselves on. We must always remember the burden they carried to put us on the journey of reconciling past injustices. It is now our collective responsibility to not let their efforts and sacrifice fall short of what needs to be achieved. We need to keep striving for an Australia where disparities in health, wealth, education, housing and homelessness and home ownership no longer exist. Not incrementally, not in 5, 10 or 20 years, but changes and commitments that can be made today with a simple stroke of a pen. Commitments that will positively change the lives of our people, your people, the oldest living culture on this planet. Finally, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which our virtual attendees are participating from, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Debbie Avery, good morning. My name is Zachariah Matysek. I'm a proud Maori man from the Arab and Sumsep tribes on Darnley and Stephen Island and Torres Strait. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Housing Association, or NATSIHA in short, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here to this session, including those joining us virtually. A little bit about NATSIHA before we begin. We are the national leadership body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander housing in Australia. NATSIHA provides guidance to government on policy and budget matters and advocates for community-developed solutions that positively contribute to the quality of life and improve housing outcomes. The purpose and principle of NATSIHA is to be inclusive and responsive to the issues, needs and priorities developed and informed by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community organisations across Australia. We are new, but our history is not. NATSIHA has been in the making since 2016. It's been a journey of dedication and hard work, laying the foundation for what we are today. We know that everyone deserves a safe and affordable home, no matter where they live. We are making inroads, seeking change now to make sure that this happens whilst respecting our cultures and aspirations. It's all part of closing the gap. We're not looking for quick fixes, we're out to change the whole game. We're looking to transform policies and practices to erase disparities and give our communities the power they deserve. We know the systems of government require work, and the cost of doing business as government is far more expensive than the community control sector, meaning less money hits the ground where it's needed. We know the community control sector is ready, willing and able to deliver transformative change now. The National Agreement on Closing the Gap requires governments to genuinely partner and share decision-making with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their communities to support self-determination and optimal well-being. The National Agreement also considers that peak bodies supporting advocacy on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait community control organisations is essential to enable a strong sector. Underpinning this agreement is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peak bodies will be at the forefront of their sector, representation, decision-making and co-designing processes. We want housing solutions that don't just house people. They celebrate the rich cultures in which we come from. We're all about respecting our diverse backgrounds and our resilience. Now that we exist, there isn't a reason that we should not be at the table for decision-making processes. We firmly believe that the inclusion of our leadership and perspectives, and by our, I mean NATSIHA and all of our jurisdictional partners across every state and territory, is critical for creating fair and effective housing policies and real long-term and culturally appropriate solutions. Just before I begin, I just want to talk through some housekeeping. So the session is being streamed and recorded and will be available for delegates to view after the conference. Today we'll be taking questions both online and from the floor. If you're online, please use the Q&A tab to the right of your screen. Those on floor, you can put your hand up when the Q&A session begins and someone will bring a mic to you. I'll now ask our presenters to come and introduce themselves and some of them have a bit of a presentation. So I'll ask Kirsty to come up in the first instance. Please put your hands together for Kirsty.
Good morning, and thank you for joining this session today. I would like to acknowledge the lands we are speaking on today and pay my respects to the Turrbal and Yagara people and their elders past and present, and also recognise their emerging future leaders, and also acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in the room with us today. So IBA. IBA is a corporate Commonwealth entity established under the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Act 2005. IBA supports Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to establish their own economic and financial security by providing access to capital, networks and skills that would otherwise not be available. Our vision is a big one, but it's achievable. So our vision is for a nation where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are economically independent and an integral part of the Australian economy. We provide concessional home loans, business lending and support, and investment opportunities to do this. Over time, we've accumulated a substantial asset base, and we're expected to manage and grow that asset base to further reinvest in communities and with people, and that's part of our enabling legislation. Our consolidated total assets now exceed $2 billion, and this has grown from $1.5 billion just 5 years ago. So we've had massive growth and massive success. Our technical capability as a financial services provider, coupled with being culturally informed in terms of our customer service and listening to our customers, has had a significant positive impact on the lives of many. And we know this, and I'll share why we know this later. Rates of homelessness and overcrowding are almost 10 times higher for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So there's 306 people per 10,000 for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, compared to just 35 for non-Aboriginal people. According to the ABS Census 2021 data, First Nations households are more likely to be renting, 55%, compared to non-First Nations households at 30%. Only 41% of First Nations households own their own home, compared to 67% of non-First Nations households. And I would say that 41% home ownership stat has improved from the previous census in 2016, which was down at 37%, I think. So there has been some improvement, and I would like to think that we've contributed to that. So it equates to about 168,000 people who own their own home, who identify as being of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent. If First Nations home ownership levels were the same as non-First Nations home ownership levels, there'd be 274,000 First Nation homeowners, so roughly about a gap of about 100,000 homeowners short. So there is a gap, it's a real gap, and it's a big number. So IBA's successful and long-standing home ownership program is helping to address the gap. Last year, we provided almost 500 loans and supported 5% of our existing customers to mainstream lenders. And in the past 30 years, we've supported over 21,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families to buy their own homes, which is a massive number in the context of the home ownership numbers I shared before. Over 90% of our home loan customers are first home buyers, and most of them live in regional Australia. They're low to middle income earners, and they haven't been able to secure a loan from a mainstream lender. We provide home loan finance with low deposit requirements, flexible repayment terms, and tailored customer service and support before, during, and after settlement. And our success is around that customer relationship. So our customers know that Kirsty's their home loans officer and know that they can call Kirsty if there's a problem. Many of our customers will transition to mainstream lenders by refinancing, and that frees up our capital to lend to more people. And that idea of churn really resonates with our customer base. We also provide support for customers in preparing for their home ownership journey, including education around the process. We've got videos online, we do workshops, household budgeting. It's all voluntary and people can join up to do that if they want to. Last year, these workshops assisted over 1,300 people. So our impact, we've got an exceptional workforce at IBA, and it's a workforce of which I'm incredibly proud, and it's pleasing to see quite a few of those staff members here today. You know who you are. They have strong technical skills in banking, finance and investment, and yet they're also culturally capable. And they're experts, though, too, in finance and strategy, and many come from housing backgrounds and are used to kind of cutting-edge thinking when it comes to new housing innovation. Our customers often praise our staff for their support and particularly their deep listening. And customer satisfaction last year was 89%, and that's a number of which I'm very proud. But more interestingly, for me anyway, our Net Promoter Score exceeds 70. Now, for any of you from mainstream banks, you would know that to have an NPS above 0 is quite an achievement these days, and we're up at 70. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think that's one of the highest NPS of any financial services organisation in Australia. So obviously home ownership is an important way for families to establish and build wealth. And we know that from our impact reporting that we do. And that impact reporting really explores with our customers the positive impacts of home ownership in terms of their hopes and aspirations, safety and stability. Our customers share the stories of the benefits of home ownership for their children, their grandchildren, and for their communities, and that ripple effect that flows out from them purchasing a home. To quote one customer, when people have their own homes, they're able to start a family on good foundations. It's as simple as that. So in other words, we provide a safe and stable platform for our customers, one from which they can plan and aspire for a more positive future and build a better life. Our customers, their financial well-being and how we create positive impacts are the centre of our new 2028 strategy, which we have just recently launched. The strategy has the 4 overarching goals that you can see there, and we know that investing in these areas will ensure we continue to achieve positive impacts for our customers. We have good and experienced finance and economic people, as I mentioned before. We've got good systems, we've got good internal controls, we're compliant, and we have the potential to do so much more than we're currently doing. Thank you, Zach, for looking after us today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Kirsty. And I think I've seen a few of you trying to hold your screen up there to take photos, but all of the presentations from today will be on the portal for people to have a look at. Saves you trying to get there and zoom in on those little things you want to talk about. If I can ask now for Debbie to come up and introduce herself and talk a bit about her work.
Okay. Thank you, Zach. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here and speak about something that I'm so passionate about. I'd first like to acknowledge the Jagera people and the Turrbal people, the traditional owners of Meanjin, elders past, present and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in the room today and non-Aboriginal people here. As a proud Gumbaynggirr woman on my dad's side, first growing up in an old home, it was an old home with no running hot water, didn't even have a flush toilet, it was outside. To then have access to a social housing property in town afforded us these luxuries that Dad was proud that he was finally able to provide us with a better home. It never crossed his mind to buy. I am the first in my immediate family to buy a home, so home ownership for Mob resonates so strongly with me, and how it helps shift the mindset to break away from social housing and the other stereotypes that come with living in social housing. As we know, home ownership is a common goal for most Australians. However, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, this has not always been the case, and that is why the AHO developed their own project to help change this. The AHO Home Ownership Initiative was developed from yarn-ups held in communities across New South Wales in 2018, where the biggest takeaway was that Aboriginal people want the same opportunities to buy their own home as anyone else. The AHO listened And as a result, strong families, strong communities, the New South Wales Government 10-year Aboriginal Housing Strategy committed us to delivering new and innovative opportunities for Aboriginal people to enter home ownership. The Aboriginal Home Buyer Saver grants were implemented and went live in November 2020. And to date, we have assisted 215 families into their own homes. The program is not just about administering grants. My team, who are all identified Aboriginal women, provide a support and encouragement along the way, helping to navigate the home ownership journey to most often what turns out to be the first person in their family to buy a home. With the support from Indigenous Business Australia, Head Start Homes, local decision-making groups and NATSIHA, working with mainstream lenders such as the CBA and Australian Unity, our mission to close the gap in Aboriginal home ownership is on its way. We still have a long way to go, but we are off to a great start. We also have a Closing the Gap working group with Newswalk, NATSIHA and Capo members to explore different initiatives to help support Aboriginal home ownership. We have helped change so many lives and will continue to do so, that home ownership will become a normal, around the dinner conversation for other families to see that home ownership is possible, setting the example for children and other family members. The Aboriginal Home Buyer Saver grants have, in a lot of cases, got someone over the line in securing a home purchase, where without these additional funds, home ownership would not have been possible. The program has also started the home ownership journey for many social housing tenants who may not have considered this as an option. The stories we hear once the person has purchased the home is one of appreciation. This has changed our life. Without your help, this could not have happened. I'm the first person in my family to have done this, and so on. And with this, I'd like you to hear directly from some of our grant recipients and watch a small video. Thank you.
The advice I would give to other people would be believe in yourself and have faith. I doubted myself a lot during this journey, but now I sit back and look at what I've achieved, and it's just from not giving up. So I would be, don't give up and get it.
I would encourage people to go for it. Definitely just don't give up, just keep trying.
I reckon if you're scared, just go for it.
Yeah, that will definitely help you.
The worst you can get is a no. Just get back up and do it. Just keep doing it until you get the yes.
It's definitely worth it.
I don't think I applied soon enough, thinking I wasn't, good enough or didn't have the amount of money I needed saved, or, being a single mother of 5 children, thinking I'm not capable of owning a home and paying a mortgage.
I would tell others to do their research, definitely make a budget. Sit down and seriously go over your numbers. It can get stressful at times, but it's something that's got to be done. Watch your market as you save, and you'll know roughly where it's going and how much you'll have to eventually end up with. Speak to multiple financial institutions. I'd recommend that you search high and low for all the help that you can get.
Now that I've been through this process and I understand the steps, I'll definitely be encouraging my community to take that step forward into buying their own home, and talking to them about the steps, the applications, because the application process is quite a lengthy process, but you can get through it.
The biggest message, if someone is in a similar position to me and is looking at doing this, it's not eloquent, it's not profound, but just do it. Just do it. You will not know whether you can succeed in this endeavour to owning a home or not if you don't have a go. At least ask the question. It might open a door and it might give you a set of keys to a house that will be yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you. Sorry, that's working now. Thank you, Debbie. I think it's really important to hear from the voices that matter most, those in which we serve, so thank you for that presentation. Now I'd like to invite Melanie up to present her presentation to the crowd.
Hi, thanks Zach. My name is Mel Jones. I currently lead delivery of the Northwest Aboriginal Housing Fund. I'd obviously like to start today just by thanking you all for having me here and acknowledging the Jagera and Gerbil people on the land of which we meet, but also just pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, but all Aboriginal people across the nation and their resilience and hard work really, and all their achievements that allow us to kind of meet here today and that we're building on, as Zach said. So essentially, being a West Australian initiative, many of you, and just bear with me, I'm clearly a little bit nervous. Hopefully that will calm down in a minute. I'm just going to call it out. Give me a moment, I'll get there. So this is a West Australian government, state government initiative. I currently lead delivery of the Northwest Aboriginal Housing Fund. It's a $200 million initiative established by the state government with support from the Commonwealth, essentially to invest in Aboriginal-led housing initiatives in the Pilbara and Kimberley. This is our sort of theory of change, and over on the left-hand side, a little bit about the current state or why it was established. But in the northwest of WA, you have the Pilbara and Kimberley specifically, essentially very unbalanced housing markets. So in some locations, there are remote regional towns where there literally is no private housing market whatsoever. Every single house in that town will be owned by largely the state government for use as public housing or employee housing. In other locations, in the Pilbara, for example, because of mining boom and bust, you know, the private market is so incredibly volatile, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. You might be, you know, if you're in the private rental, you might be able to afford it one day, $300 a week. The next week, it might be $2,000 a week. So it wouldn't wish it on anyone. But what that means is that really to keep a roof over your head, the most viable choice for Aboriginal families is to choose public housing. And what that means is that you have to choose poverty to keep that roof over your head, because there are income limits that prevent you from increasing your employment and your economic situation. So that's fundamentally a perverse policy outcome from failed housing markets. As I mentioned, we were established in 2016 and 17, and that kind of the lack of ability to access the private housing market was specific to the northwest at that time. I think many would argue that across regional Western Australia and possibly much broader, the same situation exists across the board now. Ultimately, we invest in a mix of both housing and capital, generally Aboriginal-led or co-developed or co-designed initiatives. But also we recognise that the house alone is not enough. So the house is always matched with, coaching services really. We're trying to find the right word for it, because it's not a support service, it is an empowerment service delivered, by Aboriginal organisations for their people. But ultimately with the aim of achieving social and economic independence and wellbeing. So an interesting thing about the fund and what we like to share is that there's housing in the title, but this is not just about the houses. This is about demonstrating the value of investment, the capacity for investment in diversifying housing to achieve a much broader range of kind of policy outcomes. So it's more than the house. It's about economic independence. So where are we at? This is a snapshot that tells you a little bit about how much we've invested to date and where it's gone. And down the bottom row, you'll see what our forecast outcomes are. This slide tells a couple of stories. One is we've achieved some pretty great things, and I'll tell you more about them. The other one is it's slow work. This work has been slow. It was established in 2017, and we've only invested that much to date. COVID happened. There's a few things, but because these are Aboriginal-led initiatives that work to develop up the investments, has taken time, and you can sort of only work at the pace of trust and at the pace of the organisations you're partnering with, and they are all tremendously stretched. So just to acknowledge that. In terms of on the previous slide, you saw our forecast outcomes. These are our kind of live outcomes as at May. Down the bottom, you'll see the targets in terms of the establishment of the fund, so what we're supposed to achieve. One thing I like to point out is that the CAB sub that established the fund only placed a target of 15 Aboriginal families to progress to home ownership. So I think there's a kind of misconception that this is a home ownership fund. Yes, it is, but I think we have to recognise that in some of the some of the locations that we're working in, the economic exclusion that's been experienced by Aboriginal families is so extreme, and that this is generational change. So for some families, it will just be about increasing their net wealth now, and then down the track. So home ownership is the ultimate goal, but it's not going to happen for every family, and it wouldn't be the right solution for every family. So this slide shows a little bit about what we've invested in so far. All of these, with the exception of two of them, which are the Headland Aboriginal Home Ownership Program and the East Kimberley Transitional Housing Program, all of these investments are Aboriginal-led. So we ran a call for ideas in 2019, seeking ideas from the market, and we received 51 responses, with 36 of those Aboriginal-led. And really the call for ideas was, hey, we've got this money, this is what we want to achieve, how can we best spend this money in your town to achieve this outcome? 36 were submitted by Aboriginal organisations, individually or in partnership with others, and many of those are now have received a positive investment decision. Some are sort of still in the pipeline on their way through, and some are approved but yet to be announced that I can't speak about. But really diverse solutions that came, Aboriginal-led solutions. And one thing I can say certainly is that for those investments that are live and operational now, the outcomes being achieved by those Aboriginal-led initiatives are far and away much stronger than those in the earlier government-led initiatives. So I think we all knew that would be the case, but it's been demonstrated before and again. But there's more. So this slide shows a little about a bit more of that detail on what's potentially in the pipeline, but sort of our staged management framework and how we kind of step through. So that call for ideas was very much like just, what's your idea? It wasn't a business case, it wasn't fully articulated, didn't require financials, it was just tell us your idea. And we've really partnered with the organisations to step through. What this slide doesn't show you is what didn't make it through. And so there are some other, a heap of other amazing Aboriginal-led ideas that and innovations that haven't come through. One has been a traditional owner group looking to establish an Aboriginal mortgage fund that had recognised had more culturally secure lending practices, particularly as it relates to trust monies and royalty payments, and recognising some of those, and also different sort of ownership models with collective ownership. Other innovations was around sweat equity models. Great ideas that maybe just weren't ready there and then, but are still being developed by those organisations. And another one has been using investment from this fund to establish an investment vehicle that would allow traditional owner groups to invest, in future fund money, and allow it to be an Aboriginal-owned investment vehicle that can allow them to also attract a return on investment, so that they can then access those trust fund monies that are really locked away from allowing them to achieve what are their core goals, which, for all of the traditional owner groups we work with, their key priorities is housing for their members, but there are even those who, on paper, or people would believe they have a lot of money, they're not able to, they can't use it for that purpose, because it's pretty hard to make profit on the provision of affordable housing. What else did I want to say to this one? No, I think that's it. This is one of our programs, and a great opportunity for me to hand over to my good friend Josephine, who works. Back, no, forward. Put the buttons down. So Josephine is from one of our partner organisations, and as I've got my nerves today, I reckon I've dragged her here to come and hang out with me, and I'm very pleased. But she's on 3 hours sleep, and a cup of coffee attacked you this morning. So I'll let you introduce yourself from there. But over to you, Josephine.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to come across? Thanks. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Mel.
Hi, good morning. I'm very nervous. This is the first time I've been on a panel, and I like to pay my respect. I can't pronounce the name, and to the traditional owners of this land, past and present and emerging, and the non-Indigenous people within this room. Born and raised in the Northern Territory, Darwin. My mother was the stolen generation. I never knew about the stolen generation growing up, and Northern Territory multicultural, and I'm very proud to be a Northern Territory and a East Kimberley descendant from the stolen generation. With the stolen generation link-up service, it brought me back to the East Kimberley, and that light is annoying. Sorry, it's so bright. And I stand tall here and proud Indigenous woman, Jari, Walmajari tribe, and the Jawan of the Katherine region through the adoption of my stepfather. Sorry, it's nerve-wracking. So, raised in the Northern Territory, I'm not a privileged child. My mother and my father owned their own home. Growing up, I didn't realise as I got older that some of my friends said, "Oh, you're a privileged child because you were raised in a board home," and most of my friends were in housing commission. At the age of 18, I purchased my own home. I've got 2 beautiful children and 6 grandchildren. When I purchased my home at the age of 18, that was my pride and joy, and I try to encourage my local friends, my age group, to purchase their homes at that time because it was cheap in those years. But they didn't take my advice till later on in years, and then, 10 years, 15 years later, they did reach out to me and said, "We should have taken your advice at that time because there was equity, and that was for the future for their children, a legacy to leave behind," and that's the most important about home ownership in this country today. Wealth. Anyway, moving on, I had worked in the industry for Department of Housing in the Northern Territory, and it was part of the NATSIHA program that was established, or it was an initiative. And I worked in so many remote communities in the Northern Territory. And going out to grassroots, it was really sad to see the construction and how our mob are in regards to repairs and maintenance. And I shouldn't go into that part, I suppose, but I think we all know, most of you's been out in those remote communities. And I was a part of the NATSIHA program, and one of the things I made sure that I had done was accountability to those contractors to ensure, because when you go out to these remote communities today, you know that the infrastructure of these buildings, we've got power and water, and the electrical, carpentry and plumbing issues. So in regards to my co-worker here, Mel, talking about this investment properties and what was spoken about IBA, and also with, I hope I'm not losing track here, I'm getting nervous, Zach, especially within remote communities and town-based reserves, our mob don't want to purchase their clan groups, and they don't move from different areas within their remote communities because they don't speak for country. Urbanised people, yes, who are we? We can purchase homes within the regions, but within remote communities, that's annoying, sorry, and my hand's up. Where was I? Sorry, I'm nervous. So we know about the history, about exactly what Zach had spoken about, your presentation, about past and present. So it's difficult for our remote community members to purchase their own homes within that community. And they're allocated houses and they're family homes. Within their hearts, they say that's their home. They don't need to purchase those properties because that's their foundation of recognition as traditional owners for those lands and their clan groups. They practice their culture and traditions. We all do in one way or another. With my lived experience and where I am today, I've got a substantive with Department of Communities in Halls Creek. From my link up, it took me back to East Kimberley, and I thought, well, I'm going to help my mum's family in the East Kimberley, where I'm a housing officer. I go out and do house inspections. Everyone knows what a housing officer is, and making sure contractors are accountable for their work. I oversee that, and I make sure I oversee that. And then I moved on to Yawuru Aboriginal Corporation, which is based in Broome. And the partnership with Department of Communities, I think it's a great privilege for the government to have this initiative based on home ownership at an affordable price. So the initiative is with this program, affordability. The program, the current houses, there's an eligibility criteria to be selected to be a part of the program, which is the 25 homes. There's a lot of case management in regards to home ownership for this program. I'm getting nervous, sorry, I hope I'm not losing track. Yeah, thank you. No, you're right. So with this program, one of the things I looked at was the management plan and the agreement, and I thought this is not right because the current existing tenants cannot afford to purchase this property at $500,000. So let's look at the agreement, let's look at the management plan and make it affordable. Where the Department of Communities had come into agreement with us, where we're going to pay this current market value at $350,000 and the current market is valued at $500,000, the previous price. So we had a win there, and I hope this program can go right through Australia, what Department of Communities have established, because I have 3 owners, 3 participants that have been eligible for pre-approval through IBA, and they haven't looked back, and just working with them and educating them and getting them to know the know-hows and for what home ownership is about. That's your pride and joy, that's a legacy. So they've made a profit of $100,000 by being in this program, where they have to be in that program for 3 more years to be eligible to use that equity to invest in another property for their family. So yeah, thank you. I better stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie and Josephine. I think you touched up some really important points there around, which is a good segue into, I guess, the next part in terms of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander perspectives on home ownership. And you touched on some good points around the products that are available to, especially in a remote, discrete context, you know. People are living on their lands, on their traditional lands in homes for generations. And what they see as home ownership may be different to an urban and regional context. They want to own their home because they've just been subject to social housing their entire life and generations before them. So they just want to own their home. So I guess the product and services that government are offering in each respective jurisdiction needs to match, I guess, the needs and aspirations of community. But I'd like to bring it over to Debbie, if you could share, I guess, from your perspective, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander perspectives on home ownership.
Well, home ownership for Aboriginal people is important, as it is to any culture, and to have the same opportunity to buy a home like anyone else is key, not only around enclosing the gap, but in regards to self-determination and having the ability to pass on an asset, a home, to another family member or child. Creating wealth and building that intergenerational wealth is important as well. And something that's never been previously afforded to Aboriginal people, and having that opportunity is a step in that right direction to having that happen. Also, owning your own home, as any homeowner knows, it provides that stability, security, provides safety, provides a platform where you can feel pride, you can maintain employment, health, and it sets the example for the next generation who's coming through and their children to know that they can do it as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think for me, working in the home ownership space previously to my role in NATSIHA, one of the other things was, the coordination between different government agencies. So, you'll have potentially housing, have a really good product or service offer to community, but the land tenure isn't addressed. So people have a price set for their community, but there's no accessibility to purchase that property because of land tenure issues or the different layers of bureaucracy and legislations that people need to work through. So if being in government, it's a hard place to navigate when you're in there. How can we expect our mob on the ground to try and navigate that space? So very important. I think we'll move on to the home ownership and its potential impact across the housing continuum, and I think Kirsty had some things to share.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach. So look, we talk about the housing continuum, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but it's obviously considering different types of tenures and types, from homelessness through to outright home ownership. And it's important to recognise that households don't typically experience a linear transition along that continuum, and indeed at IBA we actually try and leapfrog customers from social housing straight into home ownership. We view that as a critical way of freeing up stock and addressing some of the barriers, and that's because those barriers are real. Aboriginal, as I said before, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are much more likely to be renting in the private rental market, and 55% are renting, either public or private, compared to 30% of non-First Nations households. And renting, as we know, presents many challenges for those seeking secure and affordable housing. There's the fear of losing your rental property. It's real, and until we have long-term tenure, that fear of losing your rental property is going to be ever present. And there's a shortage of available rental stock. It's a national problem at the moment, particularly in WA and metropolitan Perth, where I'm from. And that creates fear. It creates uncertainty. It means you can't lay down your roots. It means you can't really have future decisions with confidence. Even those with stable employment are telling us through our impact report that they're feeling anxious when it comes to their futures and the possibility that they might become homeless. Previous studies that we've done with our customer base have told us that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they face racism when it comes to the private rental market. They're discriminated against, and that's based on stereotypes around size of families or single parent propensity when they're looking for those private rental accommodation options. So for us, by looking at home ownership, we can get them out of that rent cycle, and it means that we can try and leapfrog that stage in the continuum. We've worked in partnership with New South Wales Aboriginal Housing Office for several years to assist in that transition from social housing directly to home ownership. They have a program known as the AHO Tenancy Plus Grant Program that we've been working with them on to try and get those market rent payers directly into a home loan. So by doing that, hopefully we're relieving pressure on those that have to live in private rental, and we're freeing up those precious social housing properties for people on the wait list to move into. So for us, I think when it comes to the continuum, I think the point is for us is that let's shake it up a bit and let's see if we can try and put our customer base ahead of the curve when it comes to progressing forwards.
And I think as well as moving people along the housing continuum as whole households, certainly in the northwest, particularly in towns where there is no private housing market, and for Aboriginal people in the northwest, I'm just going to be brutally honest, even when it's affordable, fundamentally they're not going to get a private rental. That just is what it is primarily. But there's also what that means is that people who are employed are often what would be considered tertiary homeless. Under the pure definitions, they're tertiary homeless because they're living with family and friends, because they're simply not eligible for the only housing option, which is public housing. And that means that public housing houses are overcrowded, becoming overcrowded because people are sort of couch surfing, and even just reducing that kind of overcrowding pressure on the sort of social and crisis housing system is part of the effect on the whole housing continuum. And in addition to the immediate impact of leapfrogging people directly sort of into home ownership, now what it means is that in the next generation, the demand for social housing will be lower, and not just for their children because of generational wealth, but it's lived experience. And seeing, if you can see it, you can achieve it. And in many of the towns that we work in, no one's ever seen it, ever seen someone owning their own home, or one of their peers or kin or family members owning or achieving home ownership. And so the more people that do achieve it, and look, it's not the right goal for everybody at all times, but the more it becomes something that's visible, the ripple effect is just bigger and bigger. So,
Thank you. Just noting time, I might just move on to the construction and design. I think Kirsty had some things to say in that space as well, and then we might open it to the other panel members.
Thanks, Zach. You're keeping me on my toes. Flicking through my notes. So look, we need more housing, obvious, and we need it across the country, and particularly in areas where we don't have the right variety of housing options and appropriately designed housing options for people. And it's a particular issue with those living in regional areas. And according to the most recent census in 2021, 62% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people live outside of the major metropolitan areas of Australia, and that compares to 31% of non-First Nations people. So if you're Aboriginal, you're more likely to not live in a city than if you're not. Now, as we're all aware, I'm sure, currently over half of Australia's landmass is under some type of First Nations ownership management or control. And there are so many opportunities stemming from native title determinations and land settlements to actually really make the most of increased Indigenous ownership, management and control of land and sea country. It presents a great opportunity for Australia to really capitalise on when we're looking at housing supply. So how to work with our TO groups to actively increase housing supply and activate that land for housing purposes. So you need access to capital and finance to do that, and you need to know how to go from having an idea to build houses on land to actually making it a reality, and making it a reality in terms of a bankable, market understood proposition that you can take to bankers and financiers and construction companies to go from having this aspiration through to actually putting the homes on ground. So while IBA is best known for home loans and the support that we do for small businesses, we're doing a lot more than that currently across the country. And our investment approach is to engage and collaborate with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander organisations that have identified and want to invest in these kind of economic opportunities. And through our investments division, we're currently working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities who want to explore residential housing development. We're doing that kind of hand in hand with them in terms of actually assisting with the feasibility work, the scoping, the development, and then coming in to provide the finance to the extent necessary. One would hope that the majority of the finance would come from the mainstream sector and all of the other opportunities that are available to support the construction of those homes. But I recognise that there is a difference that oftentimes IBA may need to plug the gap on, to be that incremental catalyst that makes the deal stack. So if the deal doesn't stack when you've got your mainstream bank funding, maybe there's NIFIC funding, whatever else is in there, maybe IBA needs to come in and put that extra bit of something in a MES position to make the deal add up. So the organisations that we're working with, and we're working with over a dozen at the moment across Australia, are looking to create residential housing development on their country for multiple reasons. Some of them want it for community. They just want to build homes for their people. And whether they want to use that as private rental stock or actually sell it to their people for home ownership or something else. They're looking at accommodation for their staff. They're also wanting to build accommodation to attract key government workers into particular locations. They're looking to earn economic return, and actually create some financial economic return for their people and local economic development. They're very keen as well to create the second-tier businesses that you would need if you've got housing stock in a particular location. So whether it's the maintenance businesses or the gardeners or whatever it will be. So there's real keen interest in creating the businesses to support the homes as well. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment at IBA. It has been incredibly popular. We've been a bit blown away by the interest of traditional owner groups in wanting to create housing. And also, though, the head scratching of how do I go from having this aspiration to actually pulling together something that the market understands and actually understand the demand and how best to activate the land. So ultimately, and I really firmly believe this, if we can work better in collaboration with our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities and ensuring that we've got free, prior and informed consent as we do that, we can really assist Australia's housing supply crisis.
Absolutely.
And I think in doing that, we can create some great local economic development outcomes.
Sorry to keep jumping in, but that is just so aligned to this fund and so our experience, the impact that we have achieved. Much of that, of those economic outcomes in terms of employment has been through the capital delivery. So as homes are constructed and built, just going back to the sort of, so it really, there is a massive capacity for broader economic outcomes from the delivery of Aboriginal-owned housing. So whether that's individual home ownership that we're sort of speaking about today, or more collectively owned Aboriginal housing, either way, providing it's Aboriginal owned and delivered, the economic outcomes and the broader outcomes can be enormous, and we've sort of demonstrated that time again. In terms of housing design, I just wanted to share as well that for as an example, so in terms of, we've had a lot, even the design of our houses and where we place houses within towns, it has been very much driven by co-design with Aboriginal people, even in the government-led programs. And a couple of interesting insights from that work is that in the East Kimberley, there was very much a really clear message from the Aboriginal community that had the aspiration to purchase, that they wanted an aspirational home. They wanted their house to be shinier, fancier, and fair enough too. You worked hard and you've achieved it, and it's a point. It's your castle, isn't it? It's everyone's castle. So, and it's a point of pride, and so. The homes were deliberately designed with, a higher spec, but also there was other design considerations around sort of larger outdoor areas, different configuration of living areas than might have been delivered previously. But even in terms of where they were located within the different town sites, so that's informed where construction happened. In other locations, housing design discussions, and speaking specifically with Yindjibarndi Nation, who I'm pleased to see are here today, but one of our other partners in Roebourne. So they had a really strong aspiration when I last met with their sort of council, talking about homes that enabled kind of multiple family groups to live together, but also culturally secure, practices. So they've made space for avoidance relationships and but also for caring, for one another, and had a long conversation about, the impact of colonial kind of home design on cultural practice. And so the reflection with Yindjibarndi people there was that when they first moved to Roebourne Town and were living there, but in a camping environment where they were able to self-arrange according to culture, there was better social outcomes compared to when they were placed in or allocated public housing houses that didn't respect that. So they wanted to kind of establish homes for home ownership or other kind of purposes that had that kind of compound feel for particular family groups and allowed caring and cultural practice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just give an opportunity for Debbie or Josephine to weigh in if you like before we move to the Q&A sessions.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yep. I just quickly want to add, like, with our grant recipients, we've had several that have built their own home and chose to go down that path, which is amazing. But also at AHO, we look at different ways in which we can build our homes. We always, you know, talk to community and see what the needs are to meet those needs. We also look at, you know, the areas where it's going to offer tenants good access to education, employment and key support services. AHO's design focus is upon delivering high quality, people-centred homes that's appropriate for our tenants' needs, and that's why it's important that we consult with those communities. We also look at delivering those homes in an innovative, well-designed and sustainable way. And it's people-centred design that takes into account of climate and environment and aims to create comfortable, livable and efficient housing for our tenants. We also look at higher standards of design and build those homes of high quality with efforts to challenge the preconceived views on social and Aboriginal housing and overcoming the stigma. So once upon a time you could tell that Aboriginal Housing Commission homes, not anymore. And, you know, the new homes deliver a broad range of health, social and economic benefits as well. We also look at Aboriginal procurement targets to support Aboriginal employment. So we've got our communities working on those homes as well. And Aboriginal business are the largest employers of Aboriginal people. So that also drives up the employment outcomes, which is essential to support the home ownership aspirations as well.
Thank you. And look, that's some very important points. And I think, you know, just hearing the Minister speak earlier around, you know, I guess some of the solutions they're looking at and setting timelines for state and territories. But I think, in my mind, rather than setting timelines, making sure that the investment supports local employment apprenticeships and making sure it's more of an effective use of funding than just setting a timeline, which unfortunately in the past when they've had new construction programs and other programs rolled out across Australia, people have been forced to look at where money can be spent rather than where the need is, and making sure that investment has the most impact on the ground and addresses the needs of each community. So we might just move into the Q&A session. So there will be someone walking around with a mic. I'm not sure who that someone is. Someone will be standing up soon. And then we'll be taking some online questions as well. So if anyone had any questions for any of the panel members, feel free to ask. Just over here on my left.
Love it.
Yeah. Project, sister, project.
Hello, hello.
Hi, my name's Darlene Thomas. I'm the CEO of Mallee District Aboriginal Services. All the programs and stuff seem great, but what are we doing to teach our mob about financial intelligence so that once purchasing the home, they're not going to lose it?
Well, that's that's a part of my process with each of the individual existing tenants I have. The most important thing is with our mob is to build that trust. It took me time to build trust because I'm an outsider coming from a different state, different town. And I talked through that because the important thing with home ownership is making sure you got an income, make sure you discipline yourself. That's the key. And the key, as IBA's acronym for that, is knowledge empowers you, and that's what I do with my mob. And I've got a financial counsellor where I refer them through to their expertise in that area. I work with that financial counsellor because if that particular tenant doesn't understand or is confused, I can interpret. And that's the key as well, to make them, it's about mapping and shaping their future. So owning a home, you're making sure you got an income, making sure that your mortgage is paid, making sure you got house insurance, making sure your rates, because that's important. And the other is home improvements and just your general. power and water and making sure that you have a budget. And that's what I work with each of the participants. So,
and you do it before, during, and after.
Yep.
Well after.
Yeah, and I'll continue with them.
Yeah, all of that slide deck that I shared would amount to nothing without this. And that's, you know, the work Josephine does. She was just telling me a case this morning where someone who'd purchased some time ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, had slipped, got into arrears, and gotten paralysed. Wasn't able to deal with it herself. You get, you know, too scared. It's the confidence and the coaching, and all of our services, that coaching and empowerment stuff that you do. Just walking alongside people, it's everything.
Yeah, and I always say, you know, I drive to strive, to thrive, to have pride, to survive. And, you know, we live and give, we share and care, and we walk and talk. And that's who I am with my mob. And if I can leave something behind from my heart, it's a passion, and I will help one person, and that's a ripple effect. And that's the key, and that's message stick. So it's about having that right person in that position to deliver.
Absolutely.
And that's where my heart is. And I'm proud to be a part of this program, going from here, from there to where I am today. I never went to university. I don't need you know, I'm a simple person with simple words. And it's about talk and action. When I talk, I do action, and I make sure I get that outcome. Yeah, so, yeah, and in regards to your question, that's my key. And if someone's unsure about something, I won't push them, I'll work with them with that journey so they can build their self-determination and empower them to be proud for where they are today, because us growing up, our parents never told us about buying or purchasing a home. I could have owned, you know, 14 houses and be rich today. We never had that. Like I said, you've got to find, the key is having that right person.
Yourself a Josephine. That's what,
Yeah, and
if there was 100 of her.
Yeah, sorry for being nervous before I'm able to train.
No, it's beautiful.
That's right.
Yeah, so...
Thank you. And I think financial literacy is a key to a lot of home ownership. I think playing devil's advocate here, the other part is the service offer or product that's been offered to community needs to be suited to that particular place. So, you know, what is, I guess, the role of government to ensure what they're bringing to that community is understood, and you know, they have through the community control sector or local suppliers, they're getting that support locally to make sure people understand. We did have a question over here at the front. We'll go at the back and then come over here at the front, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Susan Needon, I'm the CEO of Bungaree Aboriginal Association in New South Wales. Sorry, I just wanted clarification from IBA. Sorry, I had an emergency, so I had to go deal with that. Regarding around the opportunities or one of your products around as a housing provider to now, what's the right word? To obviously get an opportunity to develop more or to go through you guys to, you know, get capital. Is that correct? Is that, because that's how I heard it, is that you now have that product that we could go to you to get capital to build more properties. However, so first, is that true? Yes. So most of us don't actually know that. So that's the first time I've heard, and we're a tiered 2 and we're a developer as well for our own housing company. But so can you just confirm what's a collateral, you know, for it? Do you have to have dollars up front? The only reason why I'm asking now, we're very different. We own our own properties outright. We have no caveats. We can leverage our assets. However, that's not in the same case for nearly every other regional housing or Aboriginal housing provider. There's caveats on those titles. Therefore, most of them can't use those assets as collateral or for leveraging to move into that sector. So I need to ask a question is that what's the expectation on capital, cash, because that's also a barrier. So again, we continue with all the barriers that are not being considered where the sectors are right now, because I think you mentioned multiple times about land tenure. That's an issue for the Lands Council system, for native title. So can I get some clarity around? I hope you understood what I'm asking you.
I think so. Thank you very much for your question. There's multiple facets to it. So you're right that you heard correctly. So IBA is working with several traditional owner groups around the country at the moment through our investments decision. It's not a new product per se, it's our existing investments team that are looking to work with different groups that have land that they have access to and have aspirations to activate that land for housing construction purposes. So those groups that have that land, and it's got different types of tenure, which I'll touch on in a minute too, oftentimes don't know where to start and don't know how to go from having the aspiration to put houses on to actually working out going through the feasibility steps and then working out how to activate that land and actually put the houses on there and go to market to actually make it happen, build the homes. And the finance to do that should, as I said before, come from mainstream sector. So there should be ample finance from mainstream sources to support that property development. However, we are aware that IBA sometimes will need to play an incremental difference in terms of a financing role. So it's not something that government has tasked us to do, it's an opportunity that we've seen, and so we're now moving ahead and doing it for ourselves through our investments arm. So we haven't been given additional funding, we haven't been given an additional programme to do. We've identified an opportunity through our conversations with MOB, and they've told us they want to build houses. So we're working with them to try and turn that into a reality. We can't help everyone, so forgive me because we're not going out there, although I'm doing it right now, aren't I, shouting about it to everybody, because we only have limited bandwidth. This isn't something that we've got a whole scale and potential to do. But we are working with community, and if you're interested, really happy to have someone come and have a yarn with you to work out what that could look like for your people. In terms of land tenure and the issues of land tenure, because while more than 50% of Australia is in First Nations hands, I use that terminology purposefully because it's not all freehold, it's not all owned, it's not you know, that you've got access to the land and what's underneath it as well. You know, it's completely different to having ordinary kind of freehold tenure. So oftentimes there's complexity in terms of how that land can be used and activated for housing supply purposes. We've been working on a few different models within IBA on how we can make that work. I'm not going to go into all that complexity right now, but what I would say is we're also working with the Australian Banking Association as well. And as you would know, the ABA comprises all the big banks in Australia. We're working with them specifically around the land tenure issue and how we can bring the banking sector to the party to actually look at land tenure differently. So it's early days, that conversation. We kicked it off at Garma a couple of months ago with Minister Burney and the ABA. So early days that, but I'm hopeful that moving forwards we can actually address land tenure from a mainstream perspective rather than just using IBA to try and crack it. So I don't know if that answers all your questions, but I'd love to have a yarn with you.
Thank you for the question. Thanks, Kirsty. We just had a question at the front here. So I know it's a bit tedious running around with one mic. At least you get your steps up today.
Angie Arky from Townsville. I'm also the Deputy Chair of our statewide housing in Queensland here. I just wanted to ask a question of IBA. A few young ladies came to my daughter's house one night and were having dinner, and I heard the discussions around, well, you know, we're paying off our home, but our loans came from the bank, and the high interest rates that are, you know, that's there for them now at the moment, and they're saying, well, maybe I might need to sell my home. Is there a possibility of these, you know, our young ones who have gone to the banks for loans, transferring over to IBA to continue the loan that they're paying back to the bank?
Thank you for your question. That's a good question for me to answer. Yes, to answer your question, the answer is yes. So previously, government asked IBA. So government sets the parameters on what IBA can and can't do. We don't have a lot of options in reality around who we can lend to. And government historically asked or tasked IBA with a very high first homeowner target, which meant that all of our home loans, almost 95% of home loans, were to people who didn't currently own a property and hadn't owned a property previously. And that stopped us from refinancing customers back into IBA. Given the current macroeconomic environment and some of the challenges and hardships that we are hearing about, that are, we think, disproportionately impacting First Nations people in Australia compared to non-First Nations people, we have received permission to bring more people back or more people to IBA on a refinancing basis than we previously have had, and we're very keen to do that. So IBA, we're not APRA regulated, and we're not tasked with compliance with the NCCP Act, and the complications of that I won't go into, but what it means is we can be a lot more generous with our hardship provisions than some of the mainstream lenders can be. So it means when people come to us, we can be really flexible when it comes to repayment terms, keeping people in that home ownership arrangement. Furthermore, IBA doesn't have debt, so we don't borrow from the financial markets to fund our home loans. That means that when the RBA changes the cash rate, doesn't impact IBA to the same extent as it does some of the mainstream financial institutions, and it affords us a great degree of flexibility around our loan pricing. So again, that means we can try and keep people in that home ownership arrangement through flexible interest rate setting policies that are potentially a bit lower than the mainstream banking sector at the moment. And we won't ever become incredibly low, because ultimately we do want people to move to mainstream, and if we were lending at incredibly low prices at the moment, people would feel trapped in IBA and not feel like they could go and refinance. So there's a balance we have to get to, but ultimately we will do everything we possibly can to keep people in that home, because we know if the person falls out of the home, that ripple effect that Josephine was talking about goes the other way too, right? So if you have fallen out of home ownership, you're likely to never want to do it again. You're likely to tell your family that you don't want to be touching this thing. We know that. So, long answer to your question, but the answer is yes. We will consider refinance now to a level that we wouldn't have previously, and that's a specific response that we've put in place given the current cost of living pressures and interest rate pricing.
The other question I want to ask is in regards to native title rights and interest for traditional owners, and especially on the East Coast here. I also sit on NQ Land Council in North Queensland. Gone around and had consultation, and the concerns that they have is getting access to funding to build homes on their land. And I just want to say that maybe there needs to be a bit more information sessions being held by IBA out in those regional areas, so that traditional owners can have, you know, they know exactly what they can do, but also educating the native title bodies about when they're negotiating for their land, is that what they can and can't do on their land, especially when it comes round to local government bylaws and so forth. And I think that's very important, because they think, oh, I'm going to get my land and then I want to build houses for my people, and then find out that they can't. And they can't even use their land to go to the bank and get loans, you know, to do stuff. So there needs to be a lot more work done with IBA and native title bodies in regards to looking at home ownerships for native title constituents.
Sorry, if I may just, I don't know if any of my Commonwealth colleagues are in that, but thinking about the HAF and Housing Australia, this just listening today, obviously there's such an enormous interest in this Aboriginal-owned housing on Aboriginal lands. Perhaps there's a policy piece around how the HAF's distributed around that. So if anyone's listening, seems like it's a bit of a priority. And I would make it happen.
Can I just say that I would love to have that conversation? So IBA, let me put it this way. I think there's a very clear gap across the Indigenous economic sector when it comes to giving that economic development advice.
Yep.
At the point of native title negotiation and understanding what you're getting and how best to have that in place. And I've spoken with multiple groups who've gone through the process and ended up with land that is undevelopable. And they thought they could do something with it and they couldn't. We haven't been tasked at IBA in doing that. We're trying to do it, but we haven't been tasked to do it. We have been historically put in the space of delivering financial services, right? So we deliver home loans, business loans, investments, supported financial services. We're trying to move into this space of working with traditional owner groups to activate land. And as I said before, it's something we're not shouting about because we haven't been given this particular mandate to do it, but we see the need. And I hear you, and we'll come and have a yarn with you to see what we can do. But there's a clear hole in the sector. And with the HAF, I actually think we're going to not be able to maximise the full outcomes that you could get from the HAF without that support in place. And I mean, I'll be honest, it goes beyond even housing, right? If you actually want to take Australia forwards and ensure that you're getting the best economic development across all of this traditional lands that we've got around the country, you've got to have some economic development support in place. You've got to be making sensible decisions at negotiation stage, and then when it comes to prioritising what you're going to do with that land. That doesn't exist.
Just one of the things I had as my key messages when I forgot to say it when I was doing my slide deck, kicked myself, but was that second only to the money, like obviously the money's massively impactful, but second only to the money, the relationship, the enduring relationship with the people we partner with has been added the most value. So I think, you know, Nyamba would say it and Yawuru would say it, that way we partner for the long term around that kind of provision of not just service advice and kind of capacity building. It's the relationship that's kind of added value and achieved the outcomes. Second only to the money. The money is obviously critically important, but the relationship as well. So I think it speaks to what you're speaking to there, Kirsty.
Yeah, and like I would agree, Kirsty. There is a gap, and just to echo the comments that were made on the floor, you know, it's such a hard place to navigate land tenure, isn't it? You've got transferable reserve, non-transferable reserve, native title, deed of grant and trust. Like there's all these different layers of tenure that people are trying to work through, and all they want to know is how can they use their land to build out wealth and equity through home ownership and other means. So we'll take this question and then one more, and then we'll have to break for lunch.
My question is to the lady on the far right. Did I hear you said you bought your first home at 18 years old? How did you do that?
I would also like to know that.
Yeah. That was in 1984, and thanks to my mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, and I'm still very close to her. She's my mum. Yeah, my father passed away. My dad, we owned our own home. I'll tell you the story where it led to. And because my mother was a stolen generation and I wasn't named after my father, and because he owned his home, he didn't make a will, so I had to fight to become a beneficiary to that estate with my three brothers, half-brothers. It took me 4 years. I won that case on behalf of my brother and I was very proud of that. And then my mother-in-law had children, and she was the one who had inspired me to purchase the home. In the Northern Territory, it was called Home Norths. It's like Department of Housing. And from there I applied, I was eligible, my partner and I, and that's how I purchased my first home, through that scheme.
She was a Torres Strait.
She was Torres
woman,
Strait
and
Islander.
she took on maternal role and coached you through it, didn't she?
Yeah, coached her through it. And from that age, I was very proud. But I ended up selling my home, and this is what I deliver at this during this program. Please don't sell your home. That's a legacy. You know, I'm 58 years old now, and it's very hard for me to purchase another home. So what I can't do, I want to give. I'm there to set them up to, not to set them up to fail, but to sail. And that's how I became. And can I just add to this with this program, because there's 25 houses, 8 are rentals. I still work with those for aspiration to home ownership. But the existing 17, they're rent to buy. I work with them. One of the key, for eligibility criteria, we've got a list that you've got to make sure you get a credit report. The credit report is really important. Some of our mob don't know about the credit reporting. And this is why the financial expertise is important to be referred to, because he can let them know further where those credit report, you know, you've got to have 600 or 500 and over. If you have less than that, there's an issue. And why do you have a poor credit rating? I've got one young girl in this program. She wasn't aware that she had a bad credit reporting at 200. So I referred her to the financial counsellor. Him and I get on really, really well. I'm blessed. Coming into Broome and not knowing, you know, you do your homework, you know what services are there, and then you build that relationship. He did his homework, and he found that this young girl had a loan in 2019 for $2,000. She paid that loan off, but she was still in the black book. And that was unfair. This is an Indigenous school, and it's not only for Indigenous, for non-Indigenous as well. So, so what he done, he went back to that finance company and said, well, you know, I found a loophole here, you've done wrong. So you need to take her off this blacklist. And he's worked with that company. They've taken her off the default. She has another loan, which there was a loophole there. He found that loophole, and now, because she had a loan of $1,000, they've cut it to $500 where she can pay that off. And now within 21 days, her default, hopefully I've got to double check with that status of her credit reporting where she will be up. So we talk about financial capability and capacity. I also have workshops where I deliver, and I have expertise like IBA come in and speak to our participants on the know and the how to become a home, to go through a home lender to become a home buyer. So yeah, so that's one thing. I also have one person, again, same issue, through Keystart 50/50 in debit. And I thought, well, okay, let's use your superannuation to get you out of debt, because you're going to be homeless. But I know that's not a good avenue to go to, but that was an opportunity where we did apply. And then we went back to Keystart. Keystart came back to me and said, oh, we can do a serviceability. Instead of using her superannuation fund to clear that debt to keep her home. And I thought to myself, well, why didn't you tell me that before instead of me going through that process?
That particular customer was 5 years after purchase, so that support is not, it's what we've learned through our program is for the rent to buy. The work you do before they get the house is really important to make sure, because particularly when we're in a housing crisis, you want to make sure, you know, that they're really committed to the goal. Because once you get in the house, if it turns out they're not, you know, that's problematic. But it's before, during, and even five years after, the support is still there as a backstop. Most after a period of time, most don't need it. Like if they can get it through the first 2 years,
but they understand the process.
Crisis happens to everyone, and Josephine's there.
Awesome, thank you. I think we might end it there, team. I think if we can get a round of applause for our panel for today. We're heading into lunch. It's at the exhibition precinct, and then at 1:30 there's going to be 6 concurrent sessions and a think tank, so see you all there.